Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate so many amazing people who are working in the trenches to make Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, we're coming off of the 20-year sort of remembrance. In some ways, it's a celebration of the recovery effort and the renewal that took place after Hurricane Katrina. In some respects, it is a remembrance. And as Jay Willis pointed out, it's somber to think back at the lives that were impacted by Hurricane Katrina. I have preferred on the show from day one, though, to let it be about all the lessons we learned about what happens when we can come together, the role that we all played working together to inject hope into the coast of Mississippi and to Mississippi, and to celebrate the fact that we reached so many milestones along the way. 20 years. I think there's another reason we can't forget. As Reed Geist pointed out, we've already in a lot of ways forgotten Camille, and we can't let that happen. Each storm has its set of lessons to learn. Camille certainly has its lessons. Katrina especially has its lessons. We have a lot of new people who live in coastal Mississippi, and it's important for them to hear these conversations. If you can't get your head around just how bad it was, what you can definitely get your head around is what could happen and why it's so important to listen to emergency management officials and others if we are getting threatened again, because we're going to get threatened again. And the goal is going to be to save everybody, to have no one perish in a storm from this point forward. And I think we've built a better system for emergency management. We've built a better warning system in the way surge warnings are done now. I think the computer models for hurricanes are so much better than they were 20 years ago. All in all, there's a lot to learn from, but we have to listen as people, especially people who are new to this community, have to listen carefully to these conversations so you know why, when they say get out, they really, really mean it. I am so thrilled today to have my friend Governor Haley Barbour join us. I had the honor of writing the foreword in his book, America's Great Storm, Leading Through Hurricane Katrina. And he's had the opportunity to visit with me on many occasions. We'll look back on the festivities of the last few days, but we'll also look back on the storm. And by the end of the conversation, we're actually going to look forward some as well. Haley, how you doing, my friend?
Hey, Rick. Yeah, I'm doing great. Marcia and I really enjoyed being on the coast last weekend. It was so many great events, whether you call them commemorations or great remembrances. It was really important, and the people on the coast, I think, are rightly proud of how the South Mississippi responded. I think they're proud of how our legislature worked together, party aside. Our local officials in the legislature worked well together, the state officials, our staffs, and of course our congressional delegation. Senator Cochran, who was chairman of the Appropriations Committee, just providentially, and Senator Lott, all our congressional delegation. It brought back a lot of memories, but it also let people remember how much progress has been made since Katrina. And it has been really a blessing.
Listen, just a few people I want to mention, just to kind of start it up, and we can chat a little bit about each one of them. But, you know, I thought a lot about those who were at the table who are no longer with us. You mentioned Thad Cochran, Governor Winter. I have specific, incredible memories of him. And every time we met in your office in Jackson, he would always put his arm around me afterwards and tell me, is there anything he can do to help me? He felt frustrated that he wasn't here working with us and wanted to just make sure that I knew if there's anything he could do, he would be there. You know, he meant it when he said it. George Slogel, no longer with us, who once said on my show, when I asked him about how does he want to be remembered, he said, I don't want to be remembered. If the things that I put in place help people decide to stay in our paradise, I'll be thrilled whether my name's attached to it or not. He understood what legacy was. And then our friend Anthony DePazzi, who went to Alabama about the same time I went to Alabama. So we were in touch with each other in Alabama as his terrible diagnosis came to bear with ALS, and unfortunately has passed away since. We had the opportunity, in fact, George Schlogel and John Hairston, myself, and one or two others went up to visit with him in Birmingham, and he was able to communicate. I don't know if I ever mentioned this to you. He had a little bit of use of his hands. He wasn't able to verbally communicate, but he fumbled around with his iPad for a few minutes. And he finally was able to pull up. All he wanted to do is show me a picture. And you know what he showed me, Haley? He wanted me to see a picture of you, me, and him standing together after the storm. That's what he wanted me to see. Is that not unbelievable? People will never appreciate the role that in particular, those four men, Thad, Governor Winter, George Schlogel, and Anthony DePazzi played. They weren't here with us to be able to see this incredible renewal, but man, were they part of it.
Well, they really were, and and George Schlogel and the bank were so creative in how they helped people when we didn't have any electricity, which means a lot of things to a lot of people, but a lot of people don't remember that it means the bank can't do business in the regular way. They can't get money out of the ATM. They can't keep their books. They can't do anything except George Schlogel and the bank, Hancock Bank, figured out ways to continue to serve people and very creative ways. Had somebody in Atlanta go to the Federal Reserve Bank over there and bring them several $1 million that they used exclusively to lend out to people, many of whom they didn't even know. All you had to do was sign an IOU and have a Mississippi driver's license. And it was just so creative. DePazzi was great. Of course, my wife, Marcia, was down on the coast all the time, 70 of the first 90 days. And she and Anthony DePazzi got to be very good friends, and got where Marcia would call him on the phone when there would be a FEMA trailer that came in and the family was ready to move in, and they couldn't move in because they didn't have electricity. And so she'd call DePazzi, and DePazzi time and time again sent a crew out to hook up the connection pole. And he said one day she called him and said, "Here's his address. These people need the electricity." And he said, "Well, Marcia, that's not in our service area for Mississippi Power." And Marcia said, "Anthony, quit making excuses." And he said, of course, he sent the crew out, and he said Marcia called him 100 times to cut on somebody's electricity when they're getting into their FEMA trailer or their Mississippi cottage or whatever. And it always tickled him that she felt like she could call him, because she thought her job was helping people who didn't know how to get help. And Anthony DePazzi was a big part of that.
And then, Thad Cochran, we've had many conversations about Thad, but we would have been toast had it not been for Thad Cochran.
Well, there's no question. He had risen to be the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. I toured the coast the day after the storm on Tuesday in a helicopter, and Thad did the same thing on Wednesday morning, toured it in a helicopter. And he came up to Jackson, came to the governor's mansion, and I'll never forget, he said, "You and your team are going to know more than anybody in Washington what Mississippi needs and how to get it. And if you'll tell me what you need, I'll do my best to help you get it." And boy, did he ever. And and it wasn't like he was, trying to steal from the government for Mississippi. He was getting the real facts of what was needed and where the federal law was short, where the federal law was sufficient, but it just had to be mandated. Cochran was special. And look, Trent Lott also, he got stuff for us out of the finance committee that led to lots of construction, because one of the things that they did was have something in the law that said if this was torn up in the hurricane, your taxes would be lower. Your whatever it was, the government was going to take part of that burden off of you.
They were hyper focused on getting what we needed. That is for sure. And as you often said, it helped us get back on our knees. The federal government helped us get back on our knees. When we come back on the other side, we'll pick it up from right there. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're visiting with Governor Haley Barbour. We're looking back on this last weekend, the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. Looking back on Hurricane Katrina. And before we get done, we'll look forward to some extent as well. Notice there's a little bit of nuance in what I said as we went into break. When we were talking about Thad Cochran and Trent Lott and their work and their focus and their dedication and working with Governor Barbour to get what needed to happen through the federal government the way it needed to happen. Because Governor Barbour often said, the nuance was, I said, they'll help us get back on our knees, because Governor Barbour often said after Hurricane Katrina that the federal government will help us get back on our knees, but it's private investment that will help us get back on our feet. And man, when you look at the casino industry rebuilding and the amount of private sector money that came back into coastal Mississippi, that part of the story is pretty miraculous, isn't it, Haley?
Well, it really is. I'll never forget the morning after the storm when I flew over in the whole coast from the Alabama line to the Louisiana line. And when I flew over Ingalls Shipyard, and it wasn't blown away, but it was just totally covered in debris. And I thought to myself, what if Ingalls Shipyard didn't come back? What if they decided they'd move up to Virginia, where they already have another big shipyard? Thank God they didn't. But it really was scary, Ricky. I mean, it was scary to look down there. I was asked by Bert Case after the helicopter ride. We let one of the three helicopters be used by the news media. And Bert, who was the biggest TV reporter in Jackson, said, what's your biggest fear? And I said, my biggest fear is how many bodies we're going to find under all that debris. And interestingly, 47 million cubic yards of debris cost the federal government $717 million to clean it up over a period of 11 months. So you can imagine, it just looked like the hand of God has swept away the coast. And just utter obliteration. But we...
So, Haley, go ahead.
We came to an early decision about making a plan and what priorities were. And actually, after the first Wednesday, 2 days after the storm, that plan didn't really change, in the sense that our goals were we had to get housing back, temporary and permanent housing. Believe it or not, the federal disaster assistance law, the Stafford Act, had no provision for helping people rebuild permanent housing. There was the assumption that you would have insurance. it's a long, crazy story, but secondly, people had to have jobs or they weren't going to come back. And Ingalls, in a month, put 8,300 people to work, which was, I think, about half of their workforce at the time. But these big companies, Chevron, Stennis, they all got permanent jobs along with the casinos getting permanent jobs. And the casinos did not, they didn't take people off the payroll while they couldn't work. Some of them paid for 3 months, some paid for 6 months to keep their employees. And finally, besides jobs and housing, they had to have schools for their kids. People are not going to live somewhere where they can't send their kids to a decent school. Hank Bounds, who was my superintendent of education, I'll never forget, I would have a press conference twice a day in the first couple of weeks after the storm. And one of those press conferences, we were walking down the hall to the press conference room, and Hank comes up to me and says, I'd like to say today in the press conference that we're going to have every public school in Mississippi back open by November the 1st. That was 2 months. I said, well, Hank, I don't know if I'd say that or not. That's pretty bold. And he said, well, I think we can do it. And I said, well, if you think you can do it, say it. Well, he said it, and every public school in Mississippi was back open before any public school in Louisiana was. And every one of those schools but one was open by November the 1st. We had one who didn't have any buildings, any classrooms, didn't open until November the 10th, because that's when their trailers came that they had class in for the next many, many months. But those three ideas, housing, jobs, and schools, drove so many of the other things. Ricky, you were the guy who dreamed up the idea of having a commission. You suggested it to me between one day when I saw you right after the storm. And we had a meeting at your office on Sunday, I think, may have been Saturday, the first week
Sunday.
after Sunday, the first weekend after the storm. And one of the things that came out of that was that we were going to form a commission, not just for the coast, but for this wasn't just a coastal calamity. We had hurricane force winds north of Columbus. We had a third of the fatalities, 238 fatalities in all, a third of them weren't on the coast. So the commission had to include other parts of the state besides the coast. I think we probably had 6 or 8. We had 50 members. Probably had 6 or 8 from Jackson or that far north. We actually had one from Greenwood, Viking Range. You remember Fred Carl? That was the head of Viking Range, which was, if we were going to have to rebuild a bunch of houses, we rebuilt 57,000, by the way. Having expertise in kitchens was very important. And so that commission so often stayed where their program was intended to do something like keep people there, keep jobs available, have schools available.
It was an amazing, it was an amazing time thinking about working with fellow commission members. I said this to you before, but I didn't fully appreciate the role, or not the role, but how much activity you were spending in actually Washington. And it was so as the commission's work was coming together, and you were doing what you're doing in Washington simultaneous to that, which is amazing to me that was happening. You were using the information flowing out of the commission to help you make your case, because what had happened is Louisiana had asked for, I think, in the neighborhood of $250 billion, and it created a chilling effect in Washington, and you had to manage that. But we did it in such an orderly way. I mean, we had 1,000 people ultimately involved in the commission working on all these various plans. And what it did, not just did it enable Ingalls and Chevron and the casino industry and all these other pieces to reopen, but it helped us manage FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. The fact that we were going about this in such an orderly way, and we had everything aligned from the very local all the way to Washington. It was masterful. That's why I said in the book, in my foreword to the book, I said that you would be the gold standard for how a chief executive should handle a disaster from this point forward. We may never, ever see anything like that again, because the bipartisan effort that had to come together to make that happen, we may never see that again.
And it was bipartisan. You remember Billy
McCoy.
Billy McCoy. For some reason I couldn't think of his name. Billy had been my nemesis the year before because he was against tort reform. And Billy had always opposed gambling. He'd always opposed the casino industry. And he would tell you that his constituents didn't like it. But the coast knew that it was essential to get the casino industry back open. And the coast knew that people who had built casinos with the casino floor floating in the Gulf of Mexico would never make that mistake again. And by the way, it wasn't their mistake, the industry's mistake. It was the state's mistake, because that was the mandate of the law. That you could build a casino. You could build a casino in the three coast counties if they approved it. Jackson County never did, but Harrison and Hancock did, and all of them, the casino floated in the Gulf of Mexico.
Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're visiting with Governor Haley Barbour, looking back on the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. Sorry for having to stop so abruptly at the end of that last segment. It's just a hard stop. But what we were talking about is Billy McCoy's role in the casinos, getting land-based casinos. And what you can finish your thought about that, Haley.
Well, Billy was always against casinos. He was always against gaming. He said his constituents were, but he recognized from talking to the members of the House from the coast that it had taken forever to recover from Camille, and frankly, we had never fully recovered from Camille, and that if we didn't do something to keep the casinos there, they were going to not come back, or certainly not come back to the size that they are. So Billy allowed the casino bill to go to the floor in the House, even though he was against it. He voted against it. He never endorsed it, but it passed the House by a pretty good margin. And we allowed casinos to come on shore. I can't remember, 500 feet or 800 feet. And
800, yeah.
Yeah, and the casinos did that. And most of them would tell you privately, if they had to build them in the water again, they couldn't borrow the money to do it, because no banker in his right mind would look at what happened on the coast in Katrina and say, oh, that's okay. But McCoy made that work, even though he was against it. And that happened over and over and over again. People doing what they thought was right, or thought their constituents thought were right. And one of them was a congressman from Massachusetts, Barney Frank. I bumped into Barney Frank after I went to see President Bush on November 1st to present Mississippi's plan to him and his staff. And afterwards, I went over to the House of Representatives to the Capitol, and I was going to see the Speaker of the House. And I heard this voice, Haley, Haley. And I looked over, and there is Barney Frank. Golly, maybe the most liberal congressman in the whole Congress, left. And he said, I heard Mississippi's got a plan. And I said, yes, sir. I just came from giving it to the president. I'm going to talk to the speaker. And Barney Frank, maybe the most liberal member of the House, said, if you'll send me a copy of your plan, I will write a letter to every Democrat member of the Congress, of the House, and say, this is Mississippi's plan. I'm going to vote for it, and I hope you will too. And we didn't lose a single Democrat vote. But Barney Frank did that, in my opinion, because he knew the people in Massachusetts were determined that we should be helped, that we had gone through the worst natural disaster in American history at the time, literally the worst, that the storm surge came in at Waveland 37 feet tall, if you include the waves on top, that nobody had ever been hit like this. And the people in the country knew that the people of Mississippi were trying, and we weren't looking for a handout. And that just is what overcame the normal difference between how you vote in Massachusetts and Mississippi.
I wish we could find that place again in America. I'm recall as you talk about the Speaker of the House, Billy McCoy, who also is no longer with us. I remember the meeting where we officially kicked off the Governor's Commission, and we had elected officials from all across coastal Mississippi. We had to erect a tent in the parking lot of the factory outlet store on the corner of 49 and I-10 because there wasn't a public place to go to. President Bush was there. When we left that meeting, Billy McCoy came up to me, put his arm around me, and he said, don't hesitate. If there's anything I can do to help you, let me know, but I'm going to help coastal Mississippi get through this. Boy, he meant it, didn't he?
Amen. He did. And the Democrats in the House followed him, and the Republicans in the House followed it too. It was a time when the depth of the calamity was strong enough to overcome partisanship, liberal versus conservative, whatever. And we do need a whole lot of that today in the national government.
Boy, don't we? You know, Billy McCoy, a worm farmer from Rienzi, Mississippi. I'll never forget it because we always added that in our editorials when we wrote about this. And, what's the Mississippi legislature is an amazing place if you think about it, because we got people coming in from every corner of the state, and they bring with them their pride and their sense of Mississippi. And when the going got tough, all the politics were kind of set aside, weren't they?
Yeah, it really was. And I've been around both long enough to know it's easier to get that to happen in a legislative body than it is in the federal Congress. Don't know that I can tell you exactly why, but I can tell you that's the case. Whether it's in Virginia or Mississippi or Nevada, it's easier to get work across party lines. And that really helped us when we were trying to get rebuilt and renewed from Katrina.
That just
one of the I want to say the greatest strength we had was the people of Mississippi. You know, my mama told me when I was growing up that crisis and catastrophe do not create character; they reveal character. And when the crisis of Katrina hit, it revealed the character of the people of Mississippi was strong, resilient, self-reliant, got knocked down flat, got up, hitched up their britches, and went to work. And they went to work not only to help themselves, but to help their neighbors. The outpouring of generosity of the American people have never been more evident. And in generosity, I mean money, yes, but also something that can't be replaced: time. Ricky, we had 960,000 people who came to Mississippi in the first 5 years after the storm, registered with some charity or church to volunteer to help people they'd never met. And I can remember seeing some of them, and they would say to me, "Governor, your people are so nice. I almost feel like I'm getting more out of this for myself than the good I'm doing for your people." And golly, I got told that a jillion times.
I think, that's one of the beauties of the storm is it did reveal what we knew to be already here. People came with their preconceived notions. Katrina was an equal opportunity destroyer. So there's notion of rich and poor and Democrats and Republicans, bosses and laborers or workers. Man, it was an equal opportunity to destroy. Suddenly we were all sort of in this thing together, neighbor helping neighbor. It was amazing. And people who came in here from the outside, whatever notions they had, they left here with a completely different impression. And to a person, they would say, "Thank you for letting me come here. I got more from coming here than I would have ever been able to give." I think about the North Carolina Baptist Men's Association. That's just one of many. Years after Hurricane Katrina, still on the ground in coastal Mississippi rebuilding homes. And then Helene hits North Carolina. And you only hope that there's reciprocal nature of things, because I'll never forget organizations like them and the impact that they made in coastal Mississippi, not really wanting any attention, just wanting to quietly do something that helps their fellow man. As far away as they came, it didn't matter. We saw that over and over again, didn't we?
Well, we really did. And not only from all over the United States, we even had governments that sent people from their government, like the Japanese sent sailors. The Qataris, you just name them: big country, little country, rich country, poor country.
Yeah, unbelievable. When we get back on the other side, I want to share something that I wrote about Marcia, because I want to make sure we mentioned her earlier, but I want to speak very specifically to that. At one point in my book about hope, I literally quote you when I say that former Mississippi Governor Haley Barbour often said disasters don't create character, they reveal it. When Katrina tore away homes and facades, we saw people for who they really were. And what we saw in others was a gift to us that I will never forget. It was a gift to see that in us. It was such a gift. And in some respects, we haven't forgotten that, man. You all of us coming together, like when I saw you and Pastor Christian, the love in the room for the people who were in the trenches. I mean, we were there together during such tough moments. The love, we'll go to our graves with that love. That is for sure. When we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Governor Haley Barbour. We're going to speak a bit about Marcia, and then we'll shift gears, and in whatever time we have left, we'll look forward. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio, as we're visiting with former Governor of Mississippi, Haley Barbour, who I referred to in his book, America's Great Storm, Leading Through Hurricane Katrina, as the gold standard for how a chief executive ought to handle a disaster. We may never, ever see anything like we saw in Haley Barbour after Hurricane Katrina. I can also say the same about the First Lady. And Haley, if you don't mind, I'm going to read very quickly one small excerpt. What I wrote is longer than this, but I wanted to share just this excerpt to kind of kick off the conversation about Marcia. And this comes under the lesson, don't judge a book by its cover. People see someone and they assume they know them. And I think what Katrina taught us is that we're too quick to judge people. We need to look beneath the facade and see them for who they really are. And what we saw was a gift to us. And I essentially share Marcia Barbour's story as part of this. And here's how I would talk about it. Some might say, of course, First Lady Marcia Barbour stepped up. She's the governor's wife. But her title hid a relentless spirit. As I wrote in the foreword to Governor Haley Barbour's book, America's Great Storm, Leading Through Hurricane Katrina, Marcia was his eyes, ears, and heart on the ground in coastal Mississippi, scrounging for diapers, unlocking warehouses, and feeding the hungry. In the days, weeks, and months following Katrina, she was here quietly and effectively making her mark. I never went to coastal Mississippi seeking recognition, she said 2 years after Katrina. For most of the time I was here, nobody even knew who I was, and that's the way I wanted it. The focus, as now, should be on those who lived through the storm, who suffered so much and showed courage in ways big and small. And then I talk about a meeting we went to in Hancock County, and when we were getting back, we went over on the helicopter. When we were getting back into the helicopter, we realized, and this is what I wrote, that Marcia had quietly slipped away and headed toward nearby homes about a half a block from the ball fields. We saw her embracing sobbing homeowners. We waited for what seemed like an hour, but it didn't matter. What we observed left me in awe. It was raw empathy on display. Who she was didn't matter. She was a human in that moment. Her first lady facade gone. I could go on and on about that, couldn't I? But that sums it up, doesn't it?
Well, it really does. Marcia was on the coast when the hurricane struck because she had gone down to Camp Shelby to thank the National Guard and the Highway Patrols that had been pre-positioned there. And the weather got bad, and so instead of coming back to Jackson, she went with the National Guard and the Highway Patrolman down to the coast. 7-hour drive, Ricky, because the Highway Department had to clean up a lane for every yard, every mile they went. They had to clean up one lane of the highway. But Marcia felt like her job was to help people that didn't know how to help themselves. You had legislators and mayors and senators and congressmen, but she knew that a lot of these people just didn't know where to go, who to ask. So she became the person that became the face of the storm, actually, the face of the government. And some hysterically funny stories about people, but she did for the state a huge good by being the face, by being the one who's helping the little person, the person who doesn't know how to get help. And I was incredibly proud of her for that. And when we were on the coast this weekend, you could see the affection and how when she spoke, they cheered. I'm a lucky boy. And I'll tell you, for the people who have to deal with a great disaster, one of the biggest helps you can have is a partner who cares about it and puts herself behind the people that need help.
Well, it was good to see her while she was here. That is for sure. She looked great, and I had the chance to be around her for a little bit. And the people, you're right, the people who came in contact with her, there was so much reverence there. She is a larger than life figure, and she didn't ask to be. That's what's so interesting about it. She just wanted to make a difference. And I think the other part of that is the way she informed you along the way, which was magically important, wasn't it?
It really was. I mean, like I say, she was on the coast 70 or 90 days. Heck, I probably wasn't on the coast 25 days because I had to be in Washington so much and in other parts of the state. You know, you got to remember there were people killed in Meridian, people killed in Jackson, people killed in Hattiesburg. A third of the fatalities weren't on the coast. And so those people, I was their governor too.
Yeah. Listen, we're at the end of our time together, but hey, Haley, it's been a pleasure. It's great to see you. Thanks for coming down. And I know that it had to been a tiring weekend, all the events and whatever, but it meant the world to everyone who was involved. That's for sure. We will never forget the role that you and Marcia played in our recovery. And God bless you, my friend.
Thank you, Ricky. And remember, there are a whole lot of people that deserve credit. One of them is Ricky Matthews. who dreamed up the commission.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. It was a team effort, that is for sure. It took us all working together. There's a lot to learn about how we work together after this storm going forward, but we'll talk about that some other time. God bless you, my friend. Have a great day.